I mentioned in the previous episode with the F-sharp minor prelude that it's the only one of the set of 6 very difficult preludes that you can sort of build up to. You can kind of like break it apart and put it back together. It doesn't hit you over the head right from the beginning with an enormous amount of difficulty. The truth is, I think you can say the same thing actually about this G major prelude as well. Sure enough, this shape in the left hand, this is very, very, very difficult. Playing it up to speed so that the melody actually sounds, well, good. Doing that is very, very difficult, especially playing it leisurely, quietly. I think leisurely is more important than quiet, but it really should be quiet as well. Having that amount of fine control over your hand to play fast but not like overpowering is very, very difficult. However, like with the F-sharp minor prelude, we can break apart this shape and sort of put it back together. And in fact, you can play just parts of this left hand shape with the right hand and make it still sound very good. Like for just a regular listener who doesn't know this piece, it would sound wonderful. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you like a couple of examples of how I choose little parts of this left hand shape to study them, the most like difficult ones, and then slowly start to build it back together so that you can play the whole thing. The first one, and I think actually the most difficult, but also the most important, is right at the end, where notice how this shape. I mean, the way Chopin wrote it with this legato, it's more like a phrasing mark actually, over every measure. So the last quarter note forces you to do two things. They're both difficult, but the slightly easier one is opening up your hand. So we have our hand tight together like this, and then you have to really quickly open it up to jump to this to the fifth before going back to the one. The other difficult thing, though, is making sure that this last note, this last 16th note, is very quiet, because it is the end of the phrase. It sounds, I mean, it's very easy to play this and acting as if this last 16th note is tied to the beginning of the next phrase. But you really, really do want to just like beat it in your in your head and in the listener's head that this is the end of a phrase. Okay, so that was the end of the phrase, and then we start the new one. So the most important way to study this, I think, is to focus just on that last part and really, really hone in on opening up your hand, playing this note legato, but the end of and quietly, and at the end of the phrase. So. Notice how the melody, when we have these legato parts of the melody, the melody here is legato over the bar line, but the left hand, this shape, this wave, is not. So like very slowly, notice how we play these legato while we actually ended the phrase with the left hand. It's a very interesting thing to try to pull off. I want to say one more thing about this. These jumps on when we go to the A major and the D major shapes are brutal, obviously. I mean, just look at it. My one tip here is to make sure that you're not getting your fingers caught on this black key. It's too difficult to jump like this, I think. So I find it much easier when we get here to bring your hand out Here, let me exaggerate. Like let's say I'm here deep in the key bed. I go to the E and switch my hand, like glide my hand to the out of the key bed, so that I can jump to this D note. I'm exaggerating quite a lot. It looks more like this. Well, when I first played this many years ago, I played it. Very much in air quotes played it. This was the most difficult part. I was like, just how is this even possible to do this jump? Well, this is one of the most important things, which I wasn't aware of at the time, is making sure that your finger doesn't get caught on the black key. But I'll say that again, what I mentioned just so often. Have faith that your hands can move very quickly. It's amazing how these, I think they're called fast twitch fibers, fast twitch muscles. I might be making that up. No, I'm not making up the idea of fast twitch muscles, but I'm not actually sure what it means. In any case, your fingers, the whole apparatus of your hand can move very quickly. So if you're just practicing your scales, your arpeggios, slowly building up your speed, it is, I mean, I'm surprised that I can sort of pull this off at a pretty fast speed. So just have faith in yourself, but make sure that you're not getting your hand caught on this black key. Okay, the next phrase that I think is worth doing is actually a very easy one for me. I'm not saying because I'm like an amazing player or something. I think it's just a natural thing I've studied very often, but I think for some people it might be one of those things really worth studying. And that's right at the beginning, this it's basically the first two quarter notes where we're moving up and then back down. So, notice how I'm playing almost up to speed. But because I'm not doing the whole shape, I can play it more or less up to speed because I'm only focusing on a very small part. Trying to do the entire shape at once is very difficult, but breaking it up into smaller parts just becomes a lot easier. So I don't have a tip for how to do this. Besides, I mean, I think the difficulty here is obviously the switching of momentum. That's really the name of the game in this entire piece, is how you can like rein in the differences in momentum as you're going through this shape. I mean, look at it. We're going up, then back down, then up very, like with a big leap, and then back down, and then another leap over here. So it is very difficult. I think it is a little bit about momentum, just making sure that your hand is your whole hand is kind of like floating over the keys where needed while your fingers are executing. This really is like a finger exercise. You're not really putting in your whole body into it. So if you look at the wrist, the wrist is like guiding the fingers through the momentum that's required. That felt very hand wavy, but I think that's sort of the thing that you need to think about, is how can I like very smoothly move my hand over the keys in the right places so that my fingers can execute. Whoops. Right, so notice how my hand is not very still. I'm not going like this. It is in this constant motion, a very, I think it's called archilinear motion, which is something has been studied. Angular movements on the piano are anathema, is that the word? I don't know why I'm using so many fancy words. Angular movement on the piano is not conducive to very smooth playing. And I guess that kind of makes sense. Angular things aren't smooth. So notice how this motion is very smooth. It's really like arcs, okay? Like curves. We'll get back to this point in just a moment. And actually, it's not really my point. It's the point from a very famous pedagogue, piano teacher. But let's do one more thing. This shape, let's go back to this last quarter note. And let's add the beginning of the shape. So after we end this shape, the beginning is this power chord, right? G, D, G. Okay? I think this is another very important like extension of the first exercise that we did, because it forces you to feel that we ended the shape and that we're starting a new one. If you just end on the G, on the beginning of the next shape, somehow, I don't know, somehow it feels like we're not really starting the next wave. Not just that, but again, back to this idea of changing momentums. We're going from here, we're going down, but then immediately have to start back up. So it's a very important thing to study. Notice how loud this last 16th note has started becoming. So very, very careful, slow practice, and very, not studious, just very attentive. As soon as you start hearing that last 16th note of the shape is too loud, take a break and just focus even further. Came out decently. The last shape that I think is, again, these are just examples for me. Maybe there's different parts of this entire shape that are difficult and that you want to focus on. These are just examples that I use. Is another pretty brutal one. It's over here. It's in the second and third quarter notes. Here on the G major shape, it's G major chord. It's not that difficult. It's much more difficult here on the A major, because we have this downward motion in a scale, but we start down here, so we have to have this big jump up in this direction, and then immediately start going back down. So yeah, very difficult, just very difficult. But it's if you play it along with the melody, you can just really start honing it in. Let me do that again. Oh, it's not sounding very good. What's happening? Again, this idea of momentum is quite important, that we're starting down here and we're moving in this direction and then immediately starting going back down. Let me tell you what this very famous piano teacher named Heinrich Neuhaus, it's a German name, but he's a Russian Soviet pianist. He had a very famous book, I think it's called The Art of Piano Teaching or The Art of Piano Playing. And he actually gives an example from this book, from this prelude, the idea that you need to anticipate, very generally, you need to anticipate sections of the piece. But specifically in this case, he talked about anticipating here. We have our hand in this position, okay, because we're going down like this, so our hand is in this position. However, as we're moving up, our hand is more in this position. And the idea is, because we anticipate, at this section, we anticipate having to have our hand go like this, already as we're here, we start moving our hand, turning it so that it's in this position, so that we are already there when we start doing this shape, okay? Again, the idea is because we anticipate our hand needing to be in this position, like this, angled this way, but we start angled this way. I mean, I'm exaggerating the hand positions for the purposes of showing this. The idea is be aware that we need to end up here. So start this motion, this switching of the hand from this position to this position a bit earlier on so that you avoid this very angular motion, like, right? We'll do that again. Okay, so we're here. That was way too angular. If you're anticipating the fact that we need to switch this angle of our hand, you can do it much more, I said arcilinear or curvilinear, much more like a curve. So instead of being very jagged motions like a spider or a robot, very smooth motions like waves, okay? And this goes back to my idea, I mentioned momentum. This is similar because we're anticipating, for example, a change in momentum, right? We're moving in this direction, then we have to move in the opposite direction. Anticipating that, we can we can use our muscles to be like, oh, okay, we need to go this direction and then move in this direction. And instead of making a very angular, jagged motion like this, we can make it more like this, okay? So anticipating that, oh, we're going to need to switch, so we're going to slow down the motion and have a smoother switch of direction. So same idea, by anticipating changes in momentum, in hand position, stuff like that, we can have more just smoother motions so that they're not as angular, not as jagged, and then everything gets a lot smoother. Theoretically, again, I cannot play this up to speed and very leisurely and very fast. But that is sort of the idea. And I guess if Heinrich Neuhaus said it, it's got to be true because he's a very good piano teacher. Okay, so that's it for the technique, my tips for how to slowly build up this piece. I want to mention just two more things. The harmony here is, I mean, it's trivial. It's a 2-5-1 in the key of G, except the 2 chord, instead of being A minor, it's A major. And in fact, it's a 9th because we have this F sharp, which just sounds so cool. This is the 5 chord, 5 again, back to the 1. The only other interesting thing he does here is, on the 1 chord, he hits us with the 7th, right? Not the major 7, just the regular 7, which acts, right? This G7 acts as the 5 of C. So we land in C for a little bit. And then he does something interesting where he ends up from the C chord, he goes to D major, which again is the 5, the dominant of G. So very, very simple harmony. It's trivial to memorize this piece. You just have this shape in a bunch of different keys, in G, in A, in D, in C. And the last point I want to make as an outro is, as difficult as this left hand is, and as much as it is kind of like I want to avoid saying centerpiece of this prelude. The true centerpiece of this prelude is the melody. As long as you can really have the listener, or you're the first listener, as long as you can really feel the melody, really at whatever speed sounds good to you. That's what you should be focusing on, is making sure that the melody sings out. If you can make the melody sing out, what you do with the left hand is a kind of secondary. And to go back to what I said at the beginning of the episode, if you play the melody and make it really ring out and be beautiful, you can play just parts of this ludicrously difficult shape in the left hand, and it will sound really quite good. In fact, you can just go. And really play around with it. Or just use some of these studies that we talked about, little bits and pieces of the left hand, and put it together with the melody. And most people would just love this piece when they hear it. Okay, that was it for the G major prelude. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next episode.